Chosen one. There are moments in life when the real battle is not about what people say to you, but about what they hope your reaction will reveal. Some individuals do not approach you with honesty or genuine curiosity. Instead, they approach you with hidden intentions. They push your buttons, provoke your emotions, and create unnecessary tension, all while watching carefully to see how you respond. Their goal is not understanding. Their goal is reaction. They want to see you lose control because the moment you do, they feel like they have finally exposed something about you. They believe that if they can make you angry, defensive, or emotionally overwhelmed, they gain a kind of leverage over you. In their minds, your reaction becomes proof that they have influence over your inner world. Many chosen ones encounter this pattern without immediately recognizing it. At first, the situation feels confusing. Someone may criticize you unfairly, twist your words, or question your intentions in ways that feel deeply personal. When that happens, your natural instinct is often to defend yourself or to correct the misunderstanding immediately. You want to explain your perspective and restore the truth. But this is exactly where the trap is hidden. The person provoking you may not actually want clarity. They want energy. Your reaction gives them something to work with, something they can analyze, manipulate, or even share with others to shape a narrative about you. When you respond emotionally, the conversation stops being about what is true and starts becoming about how you reacted. Suddenly, the focus shifts away from their provocation and onto your behavior. This is why emotional manipulation often begins with subtle insults, gaslighting, or unnecessary conflict. A small comment designed to irritate you, a false accusation meant to trigger a defensive response, a dismissive attitude that challenges your patience.
These tactics may appear random, but they are often intentional attempts to test your emotional boundaries. The person provoking you may believe that if they push hard enough, they will eventually see you break character. But the moment you remain calm, something unexpected happens. The power dynamic begins to shift. Instead of proving their assumptions about you, your calm exposes the intention behind their behavior. When someone is trying to provoke you and you refuse to react, the tension they created suddenly has nowhere to go. Their strategy loses momentum because it depends entirely on your participation. This is why staying calm is far more powerful than most people realize. Calmness does not mean you are passive or unaware. It means you are aware enough to recognize the bait and wise enough not to take it. For chosen ones walking a spiritual path, this form of restraint often reflects something deeper than emotional discipline. It reflects trust in God. Scripture repeatedly shows that God equips his people with strength that does not always appear dramatic on the surface. Sometimes, the greatest strength is quiet composure in the presence of chaos. When others attempt to provoke you, they are often operating from a place of insecurity, frustration, or hidden jealousy. They may feel threatened by your growth, your peace, or the direction God is leading you. But instead of confronting those feelings honestly, they attempt to disturb your stability so that your calm disappears. In other words, they hope to pull you down into the same emotional storm they are experiencing inside. Yet God calls his chosen ones to operate differently. Spiritual maturity often looks like emotional steadiness in situations where others expect conflict. When you stay grounded, you demonstrate that your peace does not depend on someone else's behavior. It depends on the foundation God has placed inside you. This is why remaining calm is not simply a personality trait. It is a spiritual strategy. The person provoking you may believe they are testing your patience, but in reality, they are revealing their own motives. Every attempt to disturb your peace becomes an opportunity for your character to speak louder than your emotions. Over time, people begin noticing the difference between someone who constantly reacts and someone who remains steady regardless of pressure. That steadiness becomes a quiet form of authority. It shows that your emotions are not easily controlled by external manipulation. In many ways, peace becomes your strength. And the more you refuse to lose control, the clearer it becomes that the power they thought they had over you was never really there at all. Chosen one. When someone repeatedly tries to provoke you, it is rarely about the surface issue they claim to be upset about. What appears to be a disagreement, criticism, or emotional outburst often hides a deeper motivation that has very little to do with the actual situation. Many people who push others toward emotional reactions are not searching for truth or resolution. They are searching for control. Reaction gives them influence, and influence makes them feel powerful. When a person can control how someone else responds emotionally, they feel as though they control the entire environment around them. This is why provocation becomes such a common tactic in relationships, workplaces, families, and social circles. The moment you react strongly, the focus shifts away from their behavior and toward your response. Suddenly, the narrative changes. Instead of discussing what they said or did, the conversation becomes about how you lost your composure. This shift gives them the upper hand because your emotional reaction becomes the evidence they use to reshape the story. In that moment, they feel as though they control the room.
But when you refuse to react the way they expect, the dynamic begins to change in ways they cannot easily manage. The first reason people try so hard to provoke you is the desire to maintain control over a situation they feel is slipping away. Some individuals are deeply uncomfortable when they cannot influence how others behave. They rely on emotional reactions as a way of measuring their own power in a relationship. If they can push you into anger, frustration, or defensiveness, they interpret that reaction as proof that they still have access to your inner world. It reassures them that they can still shape the atmosphere around you. But when you remain calm, the control they thought they had begins to dissolve. Your lack of reaction removes the leverage they were counting on. Suddenly, they are confronted with something unfamiliar, a person who cannot be easily manipulated. This realization can make them even more persistent in their attempts to provoke you, because they are trying to regain the sense of influence they once felt. The second force behind provocation is insecurity. People who are unsettled within themselves often struggle when they encounter someone who carries visible calm and stability. Your peace exposes their chaos. When a person feels internally conflicted, seeing someone else remain steady under pressure can trigger feelings of jealousy or frustration. They may not consciously understand why your composure bothers them, but they sense the contrast. Your calm becomes a mirror reflecting the emotional turbulence they have not yet addressed within themselves. Instead of confronting their own inner instability, they attempt to disturb yours. If they can make you react, the contrast disappears. Suddenly, both of you appear equally emotional, equally unstable, equally reactive. In that moment, they feel relief because your peace no longer highlights their inner struggle.
This is why some people seem strangely determined to see you lose your composure. It is not simply about winning an argument. It is about restoring emotional balance in a way that protects their ego. The third reason people provoke others is projection. Projection happens when someone unconsciously transfers their own emotions, fears, or unresolved wounds onto another person. When individuals carry anger, resentment, jealousy, or frustration they have not dealt with, those emotions often seek an outlet. Instead of processing them internally, they assign those feelings to someone else. They accuse others of being defensive, selfish, dishonest, or aggressive, when those are actually the traits they are wrestling with inside themselves. This psychological pattern explains why some accusations feel strangely disconnected from reality. The person speaking may genuinely believe what they are saying, but their interpretation is filtered through their own unresolved experiences. By provoking you, they attempt to confirm the narrative they have created. If they can trigger an emotional response, it becomes proof, at least in their mind, that their assumptions were correct. This is why provocation often includes exaggerated claims,
unfair accusations, or emotionally charged language. It is designed to push you toward the reaction that validates their internal story. But when you refuse to react in the way they expect, something remarkable begins to happen. The script they prepared for the interaction stops working. Without your reaction to support their assumptions, the accusations lose their structure. The emotional tension they created has nowhere to go, and the truth of the situation becomes more visible to anyone paying attention. From a spiritual perspective, this moment reveals an important lesson about strength and restraint. God does not measure strength the same way the world does.
Many people believe power comes from dominating conversations, winning arguments, or reacting forcefully when challenged. But spiritual strength often appears in the form of self-control. The ability to remain calm when provoked reflects a deeper alignment with God's peace rather than the emotional turbulence of the moment. When you carry that peace, you are no longer easily pulled into the storms others create. Instead, you become a steady presence in environments where instability once thrived. And as this pattern becomes clear, you begin recognizing something even more important. The attempts to provoke you were never really about you. They were reflections of someone else's struggle with control, insecurity, and unhealed wounds. Chosen one, once you understand that some people intentionally try to provoke you in order to gain control, the next step is learning how to recognize the bait before you take it. Provocation rarely appears in obvious forms at first. Most of the time, it hides behind emotional language, subtle accusations, or situations designed to make you feel responsible for someone else's feelings. These tactics are effective because they appeal to your empathy, your sense of fairness, or your desire to maintain harmony. People who manipulate emotional reactions understand that if they can make you feel guilty, defensive, or inadequate, your response will come naturally. The first common tactic they use is the guilt trap. This approach relies on making you feel as though you owe them something emotionally. They may remind you of favors they have done for you, sacrifices they claim to have made, or moments when they supported you in the past. The message behind their words is simple but powerful. Because they did something for you, you must now respond the way they want. If you resist their pressure, they frame your independence as selfishness or ingratitude. The goal of this tactic is not genuine reconciliation. It is emotional leverage. By creating guilt, they attempt to place a leash around your peace so that your actions become guided by obligation instead of wisdom. When you recognize this pattern, you begin to see that genuine kindness never demands repayment through emotional submission. True support, given with sincerity, does not come with invisible chains attached. The second tactic is the blame game. In this situation, the person provoking you shifts responsibility away from their own actions and places it directly onto you. They may accuse you of causing a conflict that they initiated, misinterpret your intentions, or exaggerate something small until it becomes a larger accusation. The purpose is not to discover truth, but to push you into a defensive position. When you feel wrongly accused, your instinct is to explain yourself in detail. You begin listing reasons, clarifying misunderstandings, and trying to prove your innocence. While you are doing this, the conversation slowly moves away from the original issue and becomes focused on your defense. This allows the other person to avoid accountability entirely. By the time the discussion ends, the narrative may appear as though both sides were equally responsible, even when the conflict began somewhere else. Recognizing the blame tactic helps you step out of that cycle. When accusations are used as tools rather than honest concerns, engaging in endless defense only strengthens the trap. The third tactic is emotional inconsistency, sometimes called the emotional roller coaster. In this pattern, the same person who praises you one moment may suddenly become distant, critical, or harsh the next. They alternate between warmth and coldness in ways that feel unpredictable. This inconsistency creates confusion because you begin trying to understand what changed. You may analyze your behavior, wondering if you did something wrong to cause the shift. The person using this tactic benefits from that confusion because it keeps you emotionally off balance. When approval appears unpredictable, you may start chasing it without realizing what is happening. Each moment of kindness feels like relief after tension, which makes the cycle continue. But when you recognize emotional inconsistency as a manipulation tool, the pattern loses its influence. You realize that genuine relationships do not require constant emotional guessing games. Stability and honesty create trust, while unpredictability often creates dependency. The fourth tactic is comparison. Instead of addressing you as an individual, the person provoking you introduces another person into the conversation as a standard you supposedly fail to meet. They may mention how someone else behaves, what someone else achieved, or how another person would have responded differently. The purpose of comparison is to weaken your confidence by suggesting that your value depends on meeting someone else's example. When people feel inferior, they become easier to control because their focus shifts toward proving themselves worthy. But comparison ignores the truth that every individual is created with a unique purpose and path. God does not measure your life according to someone else's design. When someone attempts to control your self-worth through comparison, they are attempting to replace God's definition of your value with their own limited perspective. Recognizing these tactics changes the way you experience conflict. Instead of reacting immediately to emotional pressure, you begin observing the structure of the situation itself. You notice when guilt is being used as leverage, when blame is redirecting responsibility, when inconsistency is creating confusion, or when comparison is attempting to diminish your confidence. Awareness becomes your protection. The moment you see the bait clearly, the urge to react begins to weaken. Instead of feeling pulled into emotional traps, you become capable of stepping back and maintaining your composure. And this is where the deeper shift begins to occur. When you stop reacting automatically to manipulation, the balance of power quietly changes. The person who expected your emotional response is left facing something they did not plan for. Calm clarity. In that moment, the strategies designed to control you start losing their strength, and the truth about the situation begins revealing itself naturally. Chosen one. Once you begin recognizing the tactics people use to provoke you, the next challenge is learning how to respond without falling back into the same emotional traps. Awareness alone is powerful, but it must be supported by discipline and spiritual grounding. The truth is that recognizing manipulation does not automatically make the emotional pressure disappear. Someone may still raise their voice, accuse you unfairly, or try to trigger guilt in order to pull you into a reaction. In those moments, what protects your peace is not simply knowledge, but a deliberate strategy rooted in wisdom and faith. The first step in that strategy is learning to recognize the bait and detach from it before reacting. Emotional manipulation often works because it catches people off guard. A comment is made quickly, an accusation appears suddenly, and before you fully process what happened, your emotions are already engaged in the situation. This is why pausing becomes one of the most powerful forms of self-control. When you take a moment to breathe and observe what is actually happening, you create space between the provocation and your response. That small space gives your mind time to evaluate whether the situation requires engagement at all. Many times, the realization becomes clear. The person provoking you is not looking for resolution. They are looking for reaction. Detaching in that moment does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to allow someone else's emotional state to dictate your behavior. Silence in those situations is not weakness.
it is wisdom.
It reflects the ability to recognize when a conversation is designed to pull you into chaos rather than clarity. The second step is responding with clarity rather than emotion when a response is truly necessary. Remaining calm does not mean becoming passive or accepting unfair treatment. There are moments when boundaries must be expressed or facts must be stated. The difference lies in how the response is delivered. Emotional reactions often escalate tension because they mirror the energy that provoked them. Calm responses, however, change the atmosphere of the interaction. When you speak briefly, clearly, and without hostility, you remove the emotional fuel the other person hoped to ignite. Their attempt to create drama loses strength because your tone does not support the conflict they were expecting. In many cases, a calm statement of truth is far more effective than a long emotional defense. It communicates confidence and self-respect without inviting further argument. Over time, people begin recognizing that emotional manipulation will not work because it cannot produce the reaction they were seeking. The third step in God's strategy involves establishing firm boundaries. Manipulative behavior thrives in environments where limits are unclear. If someone repeatedly provokes you without consequences, they interpret your tolerance as permission to continue. Boundaries change that dynamic by making it clear that certain behaviors will not be entertained. A boundary might mean ending a conversation when it becomes disrespectful, leaving an environment that encourages conflict, or refusing to engage with accusations that are clearly designed to provoke emotion. Setting boundaries does not require aggression. It simply requires consistency. When a person understands that manipulation will not produce the outcome they want, the incentive to continue using those tactics gradually disappears. Boundaries protect your peace because they define where your responsibility ends and another person's behavior begins. You are not responsible for managing someone else's anger, insecurity, or emotional instability. You are responsible for protecting the clarity and direction God has placed in your life. The final step is protecting your spirit by remaining connected to God's peace. Human strength alone often struggles to remain steady under constant emotional pressure. But when your calmness comes from spiritual grounding, it becomes far more resilient. Prayer, reflection, and trust in God's guidance create an inner stability that external circumstances cannot easily disturb. When you remember that God is your shield and your strength, you stop viewing every provocation as a personal battle that must be won immediately. Instead, you recognize that many conflicts are simply distractions from your greater purpose. God does not call His people to live in constant emotional warfare with others. He calls them to walk in wisdom, patience, and discernment. When your focus remains on alignment with God rather than on proving yourself to others, manipulation loses its power. Peace becomes your default position rather than something you must constantly defend. Over time, the difference becomes visible to everyone around you. While others react quickly to every challenge or criticism, you remain steady. While others escalate conflict, you create space for calm and clarity. That steadiness becomes evidence of something deeper at work within you. It shows that your strength is not based on dominating arguments or overpowering others emotionally. Your strength comes from a place far more stable. It comes from a spirit anchored in God's peace, a peace that cannot be stolen unless you choose to give it away. Chosen one, when you reach the point where you can recognize provocation, refuse manipulation, and protect your peace, something powerful begins to happen in your life. The entire dynamic around you changes. The people who once believed they could control you through emotional pressure slowly realize that their tactics no longer work. The reactions they expected never arrive. The arguments they tried to start lose their momentum, and the emotional chaos they attempted to create fades because you no longer participate in it. This is the real power of not reacting. It is not about pretending that conflict does not exist or ignoring every difficult situation. It is about understanding that your greatest strength does not come from winning arguments, but from remaining aligned with God's peace, even when others attempt to disturb it. Many people believe power means dominating a conversation, proving a point, or overpowering someone with stronger words or emotions. But spiritual maturity reveals a different kind of strength. Real power is the ability to remain steady when others expect you to break. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain calm, the balance of the situation shifts immediately. They were counting on your reaction to justify their behavior, but without that reaction, the narrative begins to collapse. Suddenly their anger appears unnecessary, their accusations seem exaggerated, and their attempts to manipulate become more visible. Your calm exposes what their provocation was trying to hide. This is why silence and composure can be such powerful forms of resistance. They interrupt the cycle of emotional control that manipulation depends on. Over time, people begin to recognize the difference between someone who reacts impulsively and someone who maintains control over their spirit. The person who remains calm often earns quiet respect, even from those who once tried to provoke them. But beyond the social impact, there is a deeper spiritual reality unfolding in these moments. When you choose peace instead of reaction, you demonstrate trust in God's authority over your life.
You acknowledge that not every battle requires your immediate defense. Some battles belong to God because He sees what human eyes cannot see. He knows the motives behind every accusation, the insecurities driving every provocation, and the hidden intentions behind every attempt to disturb your peace. When you resist the urge to react impulsively, you allow God's justice to operate in ways that human conflict never could. Scripture often describes this posture as remaining still in faith. Being still does not mean being passive or weak. It means standing firmly in the confidence that God is capable of defending your integrity and guiding your path without your constant intervention. Many chosen ones discover that, when they stop reacting emotionally to every challenge, situations begin resolving themselves in unexpected ways. The truth becomes clearer, manipulation becomes obvious, and the people who once tried to provoke conflict eventually lose interest when they realize the strategy no longer produces results. Your calm presence becomes a quiet testimony that your strength comes from somewhere deeper than emotional impulse. It comes from a spirit anchored in faith. When you trust God to handle the battles you cannot control, you free your energy to focus on the purpose He placed in your life. Instead of being distracted by endless arguments or emotional drama, you move forward with clarity and direction. That focus is what truly separates chosen ones from the noise around them. They understand that their calling is too important to be consumed by every attempt to provoke them. Peace becomes their protection, patience becomes their discipline, and faith becomes their foundation. As this chapter closes, the most important truth remains simple yet powerful. You do not win by reacting to every provocation. You win by staying steady. You win by refusing to surrender your peace to someone else's emotional instability. You win by trusting that God is fighting battles on your behalf, even when you cannot see it happening. When your spirit remains anchored in His strength, manipulation loses its power and conflict loses its control. In that moment, the greatest victory appears quietly but unmistakably. You remain calm, you remain faithful, and your peace becomes proof that God's presence within you is stronger than any attempt to shake you. Chosen one, if this message resonated with you today, remember this simple truth. Not every battle deserves your reaction. Some people will try to provoke you because they believe your anger gives them power, but the moment you stay calm, their influence disappears. Your peace is not weakness. It is evidence that your spirit is anchored in something greater. God
did not call you to live in constant conflict with people who thrive on chaos. He called you to walk in wisdom, patience, and strength. When you choose peace instead of panic, you protect your purpose and your future. So if you're learning to stay calm and trust God instead of reacting to every provocation, comment "Peace" below and subscribe for more messages about spiritual discernment, boundaries, and walking in God's strength as a chosen one.